Alrighty, hi everyone. Thanks for coming out tonight. This kind of ended up being much larger than I thought it was going to be originally. So I am Sophie Milam. I graduated from the University of Idaho in 2014 in December, the very first graduate of Mars University. And before that, I actually went to the University of Hawaii, and I've just sort of always been interested in space and space travel, obviously the human component, but robotics as well, and all of the different technology used to build habitats in space and on other planets. So when I got the opportunity to pretend to be one of these interplanetary travelers, I absolutely jumped at the fact. So I'm going to walk you through a little bit of the project that I did and give you a couple different angles on it. It was primarily a social project, being able to see how people react in these kind of very odd and very stressful environments where a lot of your normal coping mechanisms are taken away from you. So let's begin. So first off, I'll introduce you to my crew. I say my crew, it's not, it's Martha's crew, she's the commander, but we had a really good time together. So that's me on the far left for you guys, and then we go to Zach Wilson. He was our chief engineer. He took care of all of our IT stuff, which was massive. He really did a great job with all of that. The tall man in the hat is Neil Scheibelhut. He was our medical officer, and he was trained by the United States Army to be a medic in the Afghan war. Next to him is Jocelyn Dunn. She's a PhD student at Purdue, and she was our chief scientist for the longest time. She did a whole lot of research investigating our stress levels at different periods during the mission. Next to her is Alan Merkadirov, our resident orbital mechanic. And then on the right side is Martha Lenio, our Canadian commander. And she was in charge of providing us all with at least one salad every month. So a lot of this talk is going to be about why someone would decide to do this kind of crazy experiment. There are a lot of different reasons, primarily sustainability, being able to see what you need to sustain a presence like this on another planet, but also a lot about cooperation, how people define their priorities, and how you adapt to a certain environment that you've never really been in before. And what I like to say about that is that you really need to find a new way to orient yourself. It's not just about what's up and what's down, what's red and what's blue, but it's a lot about how you decide you want to fit into a society like this. So we'll start off with some facts. For 242 days, I lived in 1,700 square feet with 6 other people. Every single communication that I had incoming was delayed by 20 minutes. And every single email or text message or voicemail or video mail I sent out was equally delayed 20 minutes. There was 8 months of isolation, that's 242 days. There was 6 minutes of showering per week. 5 other people, 5 other wonderful, very intelligent, very nerdy people. 2 windows, one of which we had access to. The other was for the plants, which we used to grow that one fresh salad a month. There was absolutely no direct sunlight. There was no breeze from the outside. Nothing like, a nice hug coming home after a long day. No walks outside, no moments of solitude, despite being in extreme isolation, which was kind of a weird thing to experience. There was nowhere you could go that you were really alone. And there was a lot of things you did without. But for all of that sacrifice, you really got over 1 million memories that you could never make anywhere else. And you also got 1 million different insights that you would never have been able to form in any other kind of a way. So as for the why, that is our why. One of my favorite pictures is up on the screen now. That's our dome. And behind it is just the night sky, and it's incredibly clear. There's no other lights around when you look out the windows. There's no other houses, no people. And I think for 8 months, I never went more than a mile away from my home, and all of that was done on foot. This shows you almost all of the living space in our dome. You're looking at the great room, basically, which is where we did all of our exercising, where we did all of our work. We all had workstations set up. And above, you can see the different rooms. Those are our individual rooms, which you'll get to see a little bit more close up here in a minute. Over there was our dining room, and kind of right back behind the staircase was our kitchen, which was small, and we actually used induction burners, which are very energy efficient. But for 8 months, if you wanted to be alone, that was where you went. I have had many closets that are bigger than this room. It was 6 feet wide at the very back of it, and that was where you obviously put the bed. What's kind of hard to see is that the ceiling slopes, so if you have nightmares and you wake up really suddenly in the middle of the night, you are going to go right back down, although probably unconscious. To live sustainably, we had 2 10-kilowatt-hour batteries that were charged via solar panels during the daytime. This meant that from the time you woke up until about 11 or 12, depending on the day, you were charging these batteries up from the night's use before, which almost completely drained them. This meant that during that time, you tried to use as little energy as possible so that you could fully charge your batteries. Once they were fully charged and the sun was out, it was basically playtime. I mean, you do all the fun things like drying your clothes and cooking and all of those things. And if perchance you had a couple rainy days in a row, which Hawaii is wont to have, you get to eat camp meals, which are basically as bad as they sound. If anyone has ever had mountain chili that comes from that giant dehydrated can, you know exactly how about 3 weeks of my life went straight. So it gets a little dicey in there sometimes, energy-wise. And when we didn't have a lot of solar, we had hydrogen fuel cells as a backup. These use hydrogen combining with oxygen to produce fuel, and the byproduct is water. Obviously very eco-friendly. And it does give us quite a boost in our power consumption. And if there was a really, really bad day, like perhaps at the end of those 2 weeks of really, really cloudiness, we did have a gasoline generator that was our ultimate backup power. In addition to that, we had propane heat and 2 500-gallon water tanks. We were allowed to refill this as often as possible, or as often as we wanted, but because we are all the space nerds that we are, we decided that we wanted to see how long we could go on 1,000 gallons of water. So just for some comparison, here on Earth, people use between 80 and 100 gallons of water per day. That's average. That's counting in everything from your showers, all the toilet flushing that people do, all the water you want to drink, watering your yard, stuff like that. There on SMARS, as we call it, we got between 5 and 10 gallons of water a day, depending on if it was a shower day or not. We did not flush any toilets. We had composting toilets. I don't know if anyone here, raise your hand if you know what a composting toilet is. Okay, raise your hand if you would want one in your house. Brave souls out there. Some are better than others. Yes, it is an indoor porta potty. So fun. It's actually a really great product, and it provides a lot of sustainability. The fact that you don't need to be wasting water, and given a smaller crew size, I think that they would have been a very worthwhile endeavor. For us, though, they basically just provided us with lots and lots of maintenance to do that we kind of had to shunt about on people. So this was the big question, cooperation. How do you form a team? So one of the first questions you need to ask yourself is, what is a team? Is it just a group of people with the same goal? Is it a group of people that work in the same way to achieve a goal? Is it a group of people who just have a similar interest? So all of these things are teams, but you really have to decide, how do you make a good one for what you're trying to do? So in our case, you need a group of people who are interested in space, willing to put their lives on hold for 8 months. You need to all be scientifically minded, all be willing to take on a great deal of work that you don't normally need to do, things like making sure that doing energy audits of your house. I think that most people I know have never done an energy audit of their house. And these are just the normal things that we do to make sure that we're staying on our energy consumption timeline, basically. And then one of the most important things is, what should the goal be of the team? So it seems simple, right? The goal of the team should be go to Mars. Done. Not so much. You want to go to Mars, but you want to live well. You want to be happy. You want to feel like you're in a community that's inviting and that's, really supporting you and driving all of your efforts and encouraging you to be the best kind of a person that you are. But you can't have all of these different kind of goals and everyone kind of has their own idea. You really have to work together and you have to work towards a very common goal. And so what we ended up doing was we defined our mission success parameters as every single person goes in, they live well enough to stay the full 8 months, and then they go out healthy. So it seems like kind of the baseline, but it was actually a lot harder than it sounds. So here in the pictures are actually us learning how to be with each other. This is during our training week before we were selected as candidates. So they basically took us all out into the woods and, drug us around for 7 days, made us make camps and make fires and, live and work together to accomplish goals that we don't normally do. Ironically, it was entirely outside, whereas we were about to go entirely inside. So they did the best they could, and we actually learned a whole lot from this experience together. Being able to make different priorities, being able to justify what's going to be your journey and what's going to be your destination, involves having a goal in mind, and having that goal be something that everyone can agree on beforehand, not only for themselves but in a group setting, so that when you are having problems and when you're thinking about maybe this isn't what's right for me, you can fall back on the fact that that every single person has voiced out loud that this is what they're working towards as well. You have to be open to a lot of different possibilities. So I started off the mission as the executive officer, and having had 0 military experience before, I had no idea what an executive officer does. Turns out they make a lot of schedules, and they keep things in line, create order from chaos. And the first few months of being in the dome were definitely chaos. We had between 2 and 8 months worth of food that had to be inventoried, put on shelves, and checked out every day when it was used. We had things like the maintenance schedule for the toilets. We had water refills. We had supply missions. We had all sorts of EVAs, extravehicular activities, to go outside. And every single one of those started with a video demonstrating, what it is you're trying to do, and then a debriefing video afterwards saying, okay, this is what we did, this is kind of how it worked out, this is probably what we should do next time. And that involves, you got to try a lot of new things. You got to take a lot of risks on what you think is going to work and what you can kind of justify working, and even being able to sometimes just allow other people to voice their opinions that you're fairly certain aren't going to work. So definitely being able to prioritize where you're going and how you're going to get there. One of our major priorities was outreach. This was a project that I spearheaded that was, it basically took up a lot of my time, but it was worth every single second that I spent on it. This was something that me and a few of the other members of the crew decided we were really going to invest a lot of our time in, and it was getting in touch with elementary schools in Nevada, because that's where my mom lives, and she has a lot of access to those, and getting them to help us with real problems that we had. So some of these problems were things like, how do you recycle water? Because we didn't have a system that did that for us. Another was, how do you modify spacesuits so that they're more comfortable? A lot of the spacesuits we used were uncomfortable, to say the least, downright stifling. Just as an example, I am on a good day, 140 is a nice weight for me. When I strapped on my spacesuit and I had all the reservoirs of water going and the cooling vest and the air vents turned on and the battery pack, I was a very solid 200 pounds. And it's a little hard walking around with that extra weight when you're not used to it, and when it's all located on your back. So you're very back heavy. You have to lean over a lot. So all of that was things that were real problems for us, things that we wanted solutions to, but that weren't within our immediate scope of work. And we figured one of the best ways to create an outreach event was to give these real problems that we had to students. Because, two heads are always better than one. And having a new, fresh set of eyes on a problem is how a lot of engineering gets done. So we got some really great ideas back from kids, and we put into effect quite a few of them. They made us a great slow sand water filter that we used to filter out all the soap and scum from our dishwater, and then we would use that water to water the plants in the garden. We would then use all of the sand that we used in the filter once it got too filled up, and we would dump that into our composting bin, which would then turn that inhospitable sand and rock into new, vibrant soil to continue to grow our garden. So there was a lot of research that these kids put into these projects, and the fact that they were able to help out so much was really, it was really great, and we actually got to go and see them later on. Let's see, 3rd through 5th grade. So, yeah, they were young. We met them, though, and they just still had ideas. They were like, so we were thinking of doing this, and we had all these other ideas, but this was the only thing that got videotaped. So it was really cute. There you go. Prime age. We also each had a individual research project that we had to make our priority. In my case, mine was a tensegrity robot, which is a type of soft robot with a very high strength-to-weight ratio. And this was obviously a priority for me because it was how I completed my master's degree. And nothing as trivial as going to Mars for 8 months was going to deter me from that very important fact. So that was most definitely a priority for me. Martha's priority was creating an indoor garden, which is a lot more difficult than it seems and actually has a lot more aspects than one would originally observe from it. For example, if you are wanting to grow really sweet lettuce, you should grow it under red light. If you grow it under blue light or purple light, it actually comes out more bitter. The little things you learn on Mars. As I said, Jocelyn was looking at our cortisol and stress levels. So she took hair and urine samples from us once a month. So everyone in the dome had a dome pattern baldness, a nice inch-by-inch cube on the back of your head. When I got out of the dome, my hairdresser was very intrigued as to what I could possibly have been trying to do with this style. But she also she monitored our eating, our sleeping, all of our food intake, and is relating that back to our stress levels at each of those different intervals. Zach worked with 3D printing, which is a really great technology that's incredibly useful in any situation, but especially something like a Mars situation, where you can't just go to Walmart and grab, that little thing that you've been needing that you kind of forgot. So all of our, pen holders to put up by the whiteboards, all of those were 3D printed. We had a little display holder on the wall for our iPad that was connected directly to our systems monitoring website. So all of those things that were just so handy that you couldn't really say beforehand, like, oh yeah, I'm definitely going to need, at least 3 marker holders for the whiteboard. No, that's not really what they were after when they asked for our inventory that we needed. So the 3D printing was incredibly useful. Neil, that was our our medic, he was looking at our gut and our microbiome, excuse me. So basically all the little things that live inside your intestines and help you digest things and get nutrients and stuff like that. So I'm sure you can imagine the type of samples he needed from us. And Alan looked at how you get to Earth, or how you get to Mars from Earth and then back again, and what kind of a transfer orbit you would need, and how long it would take, what would make the most sense, and given some new ideas for rocketry, things like ion drives and things like that, just sort of reevaluating the whole idea of this transfer. So one of the biggest adaptations every single person had to make was how you define your personal versus your professional relationship when you're in the dome. Because not only were those 5 people my colleagues, that we worked on various projects together, we bounced sound scientific ideas off each other, they were also my friends that I needed to goof off with and blow off steam and, possibly try to learn karate with. Just all of the silly things. They were the ones that you needed to have with you to make a Christmas video and sing stupid songs when you're, in the Christmas spirit. And then in addition to that, they needed to be your support structure, where you found encouragement, where you leaned on when you were having a hard time. And it's not like life stopped for us while we were in there. Several of us had family members get sick. Our commander had her uncle pass away. She also had her niece be born. So there were all of these huge life events that were, going on without us. And it was up to us to find a way to not only make ourselves known in our old circles back home, but also to make sure that, when you saw that someone was having a hard time, being able to know that they can lean on you and that you were there for them, not only as a friend and not only as a colleague, but, as a person in their life that was really helping them through something that was rough. And that has a lot to do with work versus play. So if you need someone to goof around with, you gotta be able to read the signs of whether or not they're in a goofing around mood or whether or not they're actually trying to get work done. And it sounds easy, but sometimes it's a little hard. The same with science versus social. So we were human guinea pigs. That was not our official title, but our very unofficial title. So where did our crazy inside jokes leave off and become scientific data? Where did, how we decided who got first shower become just, a meaningless roommate squabble? Or was it actually a very important social dynamic? And were we creating a hierarchy? And it sounds silly and trivial, but these are the questions that were asked of us, and these were the things that we were asked to evaluate in our own lives. And a very big portion of it was trying to realize whether or not men and women had different roles in our society. We mostly concluded that we did not. There was pretty much nothing except some heavy lifting of hydrogen tanks that we designated to one gender or another. Everybody cooked. The good thing was you only had to cook one meal a week. Every single person made one really nice dinner a week. And you were kind of on your own for breakfast and lunch, but that dinner, just having to do it so infrequently, meant that you could really kind of go all out. So even though our ingredients were what would be described as nasty, everyone worked really hard to make sure that they were good and tasty. And so, all those freeze-dried green beans, they really ended up being something worth eating and, worth talking about and worth being like, hey, that stew that you made the other day, I wouldn't mind if you did that again. So all of those things we found out that they were very gender neutral. We all switched positions, so it went from me being executive officer to somebody else being executive officer, and it didn't seem to matter whether it was me as a woman or Zach as a man who was doing the role. It always got done in the same way, and we always knew to ask each other for help if we were having trouble with a certain problem that we thought that somebody else would have a better take on. So being able to have that equality within our own society was very indicative of how we, I think, grew up and how we were adapted in our society outside of the dome as well. So now we kind of get into the orientation side of things. Up versus down emotionally, because when you're in such a small group of people, anyone's emotion is going to directly affect your own. So if I'm having a really bad day and I'm sad and something outside the dome has really got me down, every single other person is going to know it. And it doesn't matter whether you put on the happy face or whether you lock yourself away in your room, every single person's going to know. Because there's no privacy in the dome. There's no sound barrier. You can hear everything at all times. So you really have to create this illusion of privacy. And you have to decide when people need to be alone and need to contemplate their own stuff, or when you need to drag them out and, let them know that you're there for you and get them out of the funk that you think they're in. You have to orient yourself as to what is work, what is play, and how often you can combine the two of them. Being able...
Do you have any built-in scenarios that increase your stress levels or...
So did we have any built-in scenarios that increased our stress levels? Absolutely. One of the things the researchers promised us was that they would never give us a hard time on purpose, but they would provide us with stimulus that we weren't used to in order to decide how we handled different situations. They never shut the power on or shut the power off on us. But they did, so none of us are geologists. We're almost all of us engineers. They did give us geology tasks to complete to a specific level of, quality. And since none of us, I was the one with the most geological surveying training, and I did one semester of it in undergrad, which was, 5 years earlier. So those were the kind of things that kind of stressed us out, and we were not sure how we handled it, but when we gave our report, we not only presented all of our scientific findings, but we also presented how we got there, who we put in charge, what the contributing factors were, how we decided to break up our debriefing, briefing, all of that sort of stuff. So every single thing that we did was data. Everything from the toilet scheduling to shower scheduling to these very in-depth geological surveys that we had no business doing whatsoever. And that was, again, work versus play. Sometimes you just have to look at these things and say, none of us know what's going on. So we're just going to do it to the best that we can, and we're going to have fun with it. Because in the end of the day, even if we turn in something that is absolute garbage, at least we'll have done it together, and, everyone's going to be friends with each other at the end. So that was a lot of what we ended up doing. And this was another thing that we had to decide on, how much you wanted to give personally in terms of fitness. And that was a lot with keeping in the idea of having a high-fidelity mission. In a real Mars mission, you would work out every single day to maintain optimal muscle mass, bone density, so that you were, when you did finally get to go home, you weren't absolutely frail and decrepit. And that was whether or not you were working out inside in a set program or whether you were doing these EVAs out in these heavy suits that were a workout in their own right. And path versus the goal. So this is actually when I was given my stole for graduating with my master's degree. So that was one of my goals that ended up just being a stop along the way on this mission that I ended up doing. So these things that, previously in my life had been this kind of defining moment, okay, I'm going to get my degree, and then ended up being, on a random Saturday after I got my email from the university saying that they did in fact accept my check, that then I was a graduate student, or that then I was done being a graduate student. That was, just one Saturday, and it was gone and kind of forgotten, just like that. We had to create a lot of what we couldn't bring. So obviously, we created a garden. We created great meals. You can see my schedule for cleaning the toilets. I'm very proud of that. And we had to create all the little luxuries that we always take for granted here. So things like golf on Mars. Jocelyn Dunn, she is a very avid golfer, and her golf article for Mars actually made it into the Golf Digest. So these were things that she went out because, it had been 5.5 months and she had not gone to a driving range. So she went out and she decided that weighing 200 pounds and having 80 of those pounds on your back would be a great way to train up for her next season. The other things you can't bring with you that you had to create were privacy. Even if it was just realizing someone was having a bad day and needed to feel alone, so everyone else wore headphones while they were working, just to give that person the sense that they were on their own for a little bit. You can see by our Halloween costumes in that picture that we definitely created a very nerdy community. Space was also an issue. Again, kind of like privacy, it was more the illusion of space that you had to create. But everyone kind of needs to feel on their own at times. And so whether that was, letting them go for a walk without having their comms turned on for their EVAs, or again, just letting them have the entire downstairs instead of being locked up in their little room. All of those were things that we definitely accommodated for each other. Creating a sense of home. Just some space that's yours that you don't feel the need to, put on jeans. You can go down in your pajamas. That's kind of the idea of being home. So you had to create that, and for a couple weeks it wasn't really there, but it was the constant interaction with each other made that happen a lot faster than it normally does in regular life. And creating a new support network. There are some things that I can still only talk about with people in the Dome. And not for any kind of reason, that I don't want to share it with other people. It's just that they don't get it. So all of our little inside jokes where we're like, go do your duty, and that you're talking about the toilet maintenance schedule. It's just those sort of things that aren't funny to other people, but are still pretty hilarious to us. And this is basically a summary of what we've learned so far. It really does take all types. There were introverts, extroverts, board game junkies, and Netflix junkies. There were everyone from the incredibly hardcore workout people every single day, an hour and a half a day, push-ups, pull-ups, all that, to those of us who are a little more relaxed about the whole situation. People who really went all out and tried to make all sorts of crazy foods. We had sushi and Ghanaian food and really all sorts of things. To those of us who stuck more with enchiladas and chocolate chip cookies. It was mostly about creating that work-life balance, being able to see everyone not only as a friend, but also as this family member, and then also as someone that you really needed that report from 2 hours ago, and where were they? So balancing your work and your life, being able to compromise on just about everything from whether or not someone taps their pencil on their desk, to whether or not they snore at night, to whether or not they say over at the end of their communications relays while we're out on EVAs. And you have to handle all of that with tolerance, and most especially a sense of humor. If you can't take a joke, then you are not going to laugh a lot on Mars. Just learning about all of these different things and how it makes a crew successful is the hard part. And I think that right now we have a lot of research on, what rockets we need to use to get to Mars, and, how to create an environmental system that can sustain itself. And having these life support systems, we know a lot about that. What we don't know is what happens when you take 6 random humans and shove them in these life support systems and say, okay, bye-bye, have a good one. So that was definitely, that was how we decided to live our lives, and for the most part, it worked out incredibly well. Go ahead, Bud.
Was there an EDL simulation, or did you just go straight in it?
So EDL, entry, descent, and landing. We did not have an EDL system. Ours basically kind of started with day 1 was when we got out of our Earth-Mars transfer vehicle and landed on Mars. So bam, day one is Matt Damon's Soul 1 in the Hab. So life after the dome. I like to say you return from another planet and realize that you're now an alien. So there were a lot of things that were weird. I think this is my favorite story from the whole thing. We got out of the dome, and we had this great opportunity to go skydiving with the U.S. Army's Golden Knights parachute team. Very cool guys. Totally tried to make us feel at home as they were pushing us out of a helicopter. But before that, we got to go outside for the first time, and we were in shorts and a t-shirt instead of 80 pounds of gear, and we were walking around, and I kept just getting kind of irritated in my eyes, and I was like, oh man, like somebody is sitting behind a rock with a mirror, right, and they're shining it in my eyes. That's what I was thinking, and I was looking around for this joker, and I'm like, come on guys, I'm trying to enjoy my first walk outside, and I stop, and it stops. And I go forward a little, and it starts again. So I stop, and it stops. I'm like, oh, this is weird. So I take another step forward, and I happen to be looking down at the time, and the sunlight reflecting on my shins was actually blinding me. I kid you not, that's how white I was. It was like the entire absence of any sort of color whatsoever. And I just looked down, and I'm walking with my army guy who's gonna, tandem jump with me. And I just start laughing. I'm just like this close to rolling on the ground, and he's like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, I'm just getting blinded by my own legs, dome problems. So yeah, and it involved a lot of readjusting. So that's me getting thrown out of a Chinook helicopter, which was awesome. So yeah, just how you redefine your friendships now that you're no longer stuck with each other in a very small area. How you decide to fit in with your old family and friend circles, and how you decide how much you would like to stand out for doing this kind of a project. Go ahead.
Was the thought of vitamin D or the lack of vitamin D ever put into the stress part of the research? Like when you guys were in there getting more stressed, not getting outside to go have stress relief when you get the sun? Was that ever put into the research?
It wasn't directly addressed within the research, so whether or not being outside and being able to absorb vitamin D from the sun helped out. But there were a lot of, so during our stress questionnaires, one of the things that they asked was whether or not we had gone on EVA, because just having that type of light going into your eyes, it affects your brain chemistry and all of the different hormones that you're releasing and stuff like that, which can alter your stress levels. So it was a question that they asked. So currently, we are not allowed to know any of the data that they have received from us, because there's another mission going on right now, and those guys are in there for a year. They went in on August 28th, and so on August 28th, they will come out again. But until that time, we're basically just one data point in a set of 3 experiments. So we're the second one. But yeah, they had questions that alluded to that, I would say. But no, they never actually, I don't think it was a conscious effort to see what that was like. Jocelyn, on the other hand, she recorded all of that very meticulously, and I think that it plays a role in her research especially. Can you guys hold on for one more slide? Okay. So this was one of the ways that I was able to stand out, having done this really great mission. For some reason, they chose me as one of the Forbes 30 under 30 scientists in 2015. Which was really awesome. I got to go and I got to do a lot of stuff with all the under 30 kids, people, not kids, people, and it was great being able to be around so many very inspiring people, and it really gave you a sense of humility and humbled you out, because there are some people out there who are doing crazy things, like having turbine heart replacements, so you won't actually have a pulse you'll have a whir in your chest, and I think that's really cool. And just, yeah, a lot of people doing a lot of really cool things. So it opened up a lot of great doors for me, and I got to have a lot of great food, which was the best part. And so basically, just in the future, astronauts will go and they'll have a mission that lasts 8 months, and that'll get them from Earth to Mars. In order, I think, to make the trip worth it, instead of Matt Damon staying for 30 days and then coming back trying to catch that orbital period, I think it makes the most sense to stay for about 18 months until the planets come back into a good realignment, and then making another 8-month trip back. So that's a lot of time. That's, a very long period of time that people haven't ever really been on their own for that long. You hear all of these great stories about people on, old, ships and stuff like that, where they were at sea for years, and that's kind of what these guys are doing, but with an infinitely harsher environment. So you have to take a look at whether or not you want to spend all of your time researching these rockets and habitat systems, and decide that you really do need to spend a good portion studying these small-scale human societies that need to exist for very long durations, in very close quarters, and with, a lot of isolation. So I think that while perhaps I won't be in the first crew that gets to go to Mars, I think that with this kind of continued research, there's going to be a really good chance that maybe the generation after mine will have all of the data that they need to be able to pick a good crew and to be able to make all of these very science fiction-y dreams be a reality. And that what you really need to do is you need to learn how to build a team that's willing to put the mission first. And that in the end, it's not about everyone getting along. It's not about everyone having a great time every single day of their lives, but it's about being able to put an idea above everything else in your life and being able to commit to that. And eventually, this will not just be, a photoshopped image. Eventually, this will be real, and we'll get to have these kind of panoramas. So thank you all very much for listening. I'm totally open to questions.
Just to give us groundlings a little comparison, you had 1,700 square feet. Ask Barbara, how many square feet is this storefront?
This right here is about 700.
That's about right.
This right
Yeah,
here is about
the room that
700.
we're occupying.
About 1,700?
Right where you are.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you would like to know what my room size was like, I think that little vestibule would be 2 rooms. Yes, go ahead.
What impact did it have on you to come out with no expenses for 8 months and all of your salary accumulated?
I had a very wonderful summer. No, I got to come out, and having lived really, really closely with 5 people in a place with absolutely no wide sweeping vistas, I came here to Smelterville, actually, which is 30 miles east. And I got to experience a new breed of isolation where I could go outside anytime that I wanted, but I wasn't bugged with a whole bunch of crowds and stuff. It was weird. I'd never been claustrophobic in crowds before, but one of the things that I spent my nice stipend on was going to a great music festival, Braun Brothers, and just being in a crowd again. I made it all the way up to the front, and I was having a good time, and I look back, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna leave now. And just went and found my own little area, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna stay here for an hour and kind of decompress.
Was there something that you really, really had to catch up on, like drinking 2 gallons of lemonade or binge watching Downton Abbey or something like that?
Yes, my fisherwoman skills had become appalling. I spent every single free hour on the river to make up for it. But I would say cheese. Oh, yeah, cheese. You guys don't even know about cheese. You think you know about cheese? You don't know about cheese. We had freeze-dried shredded cheese for 8 months. And if you do the rehydration process wrong, even a little bit, you eat plastic. Like not even cheese tasting plastic. For some reason, it doesn't even taste like cheese, it just tastes like plastic. So cheese and carrots, any kind of raw veggie, anything that doesn't taste like sponge. It's great. So I ate a lot. I had a lot of big old greaseball burgers and some ribs and a bunch of cheese.
I assume you stay in touch with your fellow crew members.
Yes, so I stay in touch often with my crew members. Last year during we call it our Domiversary, which is October 15th, me, Martha, and Zach actually went around, and that was when we met all the schools that we did outreach with, and we actually saw The Martian together, which was awesome. And in another month, I'll head to Indianapolis, where Martha, Jocelyn, and I will be in another outreach event. I talk with Alan fairly regularly, email pretty much everyone all the time, so yeah, we stay in touch well.
What kind of access to, was there any kind of access to entertainment, books? You're
Yes.
limited on space, so you can only
We
do so
are.
much.
You're limited on space. I happen to have a wonderful brother who spent some time in China and came back with a digital library of over, thousands of books. So I brought that with me to the Dome. Everyone brought their, movie collection, TV collection, everything like that. We had some of our friends on the outside that we kept in touch with. We all opened up big Dropbox storages, and so we were able to get media from the outside via that network. And we even watched Super Bowl and a few of the March Madness games. So we got some kind of like treat TV, and it would have commercials in it and stuff, and that was really weird. But yeah, we had some good access to that. We didn't have full internet. We had a very restricted internet, basically because you're not ever going to stream that much data to Mars. So we had our support crew, a wonderful first-tier support crew, that anytime we needed a story from a specific news network or really wanted to know what my friend was talking about with this one YouTube video that seems to be super popular, we would get that, possibly downloaded and sent to us, and then we could all kind of pretend like we were back in the game, but yeah.
So, did you like watch movies together and stuff like that? So,
Yes.
and also, one thing, if I ever went to Mars, I'd bring my tablet.
Yes, we had 2 tablets. We all got to personally test the difference between the iPad and the Samsung tablet. If any of you have tried the Samsung tablet, I'm sure you know which one we went with. Yeah, iPads, and I don't even like Apple products.
Sounds like you had a set of rules to begin with, as far as when you talk about interacting with everybody and knowing, okay, you had to decide at some point that you were gonna leave this person alone because they needed that time alone.
Yeah, so we definitely did. We had we called it the hard question night, and it was a lot about boundaries and basically, what do you do when you're sad? And this isn't a question that people get asked normally. I know that I hadn't ever had anyone say, okay, so what should I do if you get sad? Normally it's something that evolves as your relationship with that person evolves. So yeah, we all kind of thought about it for a second, and among the hard questions was, when is your point that you need to leave? So, and these were things like, what if your mom dies? It's like, well, if she's already gone and there's nothing that I can do to make the situation any better, then, to be high mission fidelity, you would stay and you would act like that was just what had happened. If, for example, my mom got really sick and needed help, that was when I would leave. But I put someone in charge of that on the outside. I have 3 brothers. I have a very wonderful oldest brother. And I told him that it was his job if there were any problems in the family. If there were, it was his decision to make. If it would make it better if I came back, I would come back. And if it wasn't going to matter one way or the other, then that was kind of his call to make and his job to inform me. So yeah, lots of hard questions. Also things like kind of the more awkward questions to ask, like what do you consider creepy activity? Because I mean, some people like they really don't like it when you read over their shoulder, and it's not like it irritates them. They get legitimately creeped out, and so we all had our pet peeves that you then had to voice in front of everyone so that everyone could know that you're really, really super weird about people chewing on tinfoil or like the metal ends of pencils. No, it's just horrible for me. But everyone has those little things that other people don't even think about, but that you cannot have around you.
I'm curious about your nutritional status, where you didn't have exposure to the sun and the quality of food. Geez, how did you take supplements, or how was that evaluated, and what did you do about it?
So that was not really. I guess that was not really kept track of very much, except by yourself and by the medical officer. So obviously a problem with dehydrated foods, especially learning to cook with them kind of in the environment that we were in, is that sometimes you get it wrong, and sometimes that causes some intestinal discomfort with people. Constipation was a huge problem in the dome. But we had all kinds of supplements like vitamins and calcium supplements especially. And then, of course, we also had different fiber drinks that I think mostly became just a dietary, I don't know, what do you call it, a dietary habit. So maybe 2 or 3 days out of the week, instead of having orange, well, okay, I had hot tang, but instead of having hot tang for breakfast, I had a fiber drink for breakfast. And that was just to, kind of preventative maintenance. But yeah, it wasn't really recorded a lot.
This was already assigned before you left.
Yes.
Medical emergencies, appendicitis, a bad tooth. What about that?
Zach stabbed himself in the hand with a chisel, trying to get a part off of the 3D printer sheet, and that required stitches. We had a medical professional, a doctor, who was on call to take all of our kind of things that he could take care of in-house. We also had a helicopter landing zone that we had mapped out previously with emergency personnel who would come in, and if someone did break their leg or required immediate hospitalization, that could happen really quickly. Every single one of us was incredibly worried about our dental health. So everyone was really good at flossing and brushing all the time, and that was just kind of our own thing that we did. But yeah, we had a lot of different kind of emergency situations mapped out for whether or not someone got sick, hurt, and ultimately it was our medics, not our commander, but our medical officer's call to say, okay, we're not going to call the doc, we're going to call the ambulance, and we're going to get you, on the gurney, we're going to take you to the landing zone, and you're going to be helicoptered out of there.
And nothing happened?
The doctor had to come in, I think, right before Halloween to stitch up Zach's hand. It cut pretty deep. He had a lot of loss of feeling there for a bit, but other than that, I think it was 10 stitches. Everything else, we were fine.
Were any of the findings from the Biosphere 2 program years before used to set up this program?
No, this was mainly focused on the social aspects of the mission instead of creating a more sustainable habitat and a more, realistic habitat. So this was almost entirely focused on the social and not on, creating proper environment through, plants and stuff like that.
Was it decided to do 8 months because?
So basically, they got the funding to do 3 missions, a 4-month mission, an 8-month mission, and a 12-month mission. So keeping that increment normal, they were trying to one of the big things they were trying to find out is something called third quarter syndrome, which apparently has nothing to do with the actual third quarter of the mission, but it's more like a relative time, and that's kind of it's their everything is hitting the fan moment, which apparently every mission has, and certainly ours did as well. But there's a time where just things seem to go wrong, people don't behave the way they normally do, and it tends to come near the end of a mission when people are starting to split their focus between the mission and what comes next. And so we definitely had that 2 months before the end of our mission. We went through our third quarter syndrome.
Did you want to go again?
Yes.
Were you allowed? Can you reapply to go?
I can, but they wouldn't select me because the data that they're looking at right now is all these first-time people going into this environment, and having someone who's already been through will just kind of throw a wrench in that data. It'll be I would be an anomaly and not a normal data point, and right now what they need is more normal data points. I'm gonna go.
Did they regulate daylight and evening for you?
They did not. We were on a totally natural cycle. So I was telling you guys before, we had a big white dome, and this is really, really obvious to see from the road in Hawaii. And so what they actually ended up doing was, instead of us having a nice white dome full of ambient light, they put a big old camouflage cover on us, which effectively cut out all of our ambient light. So other than that, no, there was no regulating of day and night.
Do you think you and your crew could do a full Mars mission?
Yes. Yes.
Because you've got 1,700 feet here, but if you're going 8 months in a capsule or in a,
It would be significantly less. You would have like 800 square feet.
right.
Yeah.
So that would make the dynamic a little different, wouldn't it?
Very different.
Are
Absolutely.
they doing that as well, or?
Right now, no. The High Seas program is not looking at that aspect of it. Again, just focusing on, once you're there, how you adapt to that situation. The changing situations between an extremely, extremely confined environment like a capsule would be on your mission there and back. That would, I don't know. I would have to really psych myself up to apply for that mission.
Would they put you in a sleep or something like that?
No, I don't believe they would. I think that you would still be needed to maintain the spaceship and everything like that. NASA doesn't like not having a human pilot when there's humans in a craft. But there are all kinds of cool things that you can do to maybe increase your initial acceleration. So a limiting factor is the fact that you have air in your body. So if you go too fast, your lungs will explode, basically, or implode. But if you were to, for example, before accelerating, drown yourself in a breathable fluid, then you would be able to breathe. But then you wouldn't have that dead space. You would be able to really increase the acceleration that a normal human body could handle. So there's all kinds of things. But NASA's pretty, as they should be. They're very timid about testing on humans, which we all appreciate very much.
Could you just borrow the Starship Enterprise?
Captain Kirk never calls me back.
I was just wondering too, did you have much opportunity to visit the dome prior to living in it for 8 months so that you could get a feel and know that, have a feeling for it before going? And then one other question after that, did you learn anything about yourself that you didn't know?
Good question.
Yes, on both questions. So yes, we spent 2 days becoming acquainted with the dome. In our 7-day training week that we spent with all of the different individuals who had built the dome, designed the dome, put all the different systems in place, like our internet system and things like that. So yeah, we did get to spend a little bit of time. Unfortunately, it's kind of like the first time you try anything, you don't really know what questions to ask beforehand until you've got a week in, and then you're like, why didn't you tell me about this and this? And they're like, you didn't ask about that and that. So, so we had a learning curve in the beginning. As for, did I learn anything about myself? Yes, I learned a whole lot about myself. I would have classified myself as fairly introverted before. And I realized that, being around humans is super great, and that I didn't realize how much I rely on just the everyday kind of interactions that people had. So I think anyone here could think back through their day and, list off 20 people that they've interacted with, not only friends and family that you've talked with and had real conversations with, but, the barista who took your order at Starbucks, and, the waiter who took your lunch order, and that colleague that maybe you don't really like super a lot, but, asked you how your day was. All of those are things that, people normally just toss out as, social interactions, but they really are. They're a huge part of it, and they're a lot of what makes you feel connected to a certain community. So even if you don't really like that one person at work who keeps saying hi to you, you still feel like you're in that coworker's community. And even if, there's that neighbor that, will talk and talk and talk, and, seems like they'll never let you get to dinner, it's still kind of nice. You walk out and you're like, oh, that was a good talk. Like, we had a good time. Like, I'm really hungry, but we had a good time. We were able to get all of the messages that we could handle, but it's also the fact that when you in your normal lives get an email from someone, I bet, 9 times out of 10 you don't instantly reply, which I feel is normal. I still don't do that now that I'm out of the dome. But being in the dome, we were at our computers pretty much constantly. We always had a tablet or a computer or some type of device with us that would let us know when we were getting emails. And so we would get an email from, I'd get an email from my mom and I would instantly respond. I read it, devoured it, and then sent back, my small novel as a response. And then, 3 days would go by and I'm like, Mom, I need to know what's going on. So, just trying to fit in the 2 different schedules, dome schedule with real normal person life, was hard. Yes, sir.
What are your aspirations for your future?
Well, I want a pony. But other than that, I would like to get more involved with the community where I am, being able to utilize my specific skills and my kind of obvious passion for space and kind of NASA-related things. Just being able to get more people involved, because a lot of the people that I met when I was young that really inspired me, I thought that they were like this whole other, like species of human or something, that they were so far removed, and then getting to actually meet them and they're like, oh yeah, I played soccer in middle school, or like I fell over the hurdles once. Like, it really brought them down to earth and made them real people. And it made me think that, these girls who maybe weren't super athletic, or, maybe weren't super into, chemistry when they were 10 years old, they still got to become astronauts. And so why not me? So if I can kind of be that kind of a person, I guess, to someone else, that's definitely in my wheelhouse. But for now, I have a really wonderful job that lets me expand my own personal horizons, and they're really encouraging of me as an employee. I really enjoy working there, and I have no plans to leave. Certainly. I am a Mercury analyst and systems engineer for SBL Analytical in Smelterville, Idaho. And so basically what that means is that I work with their Mercury analyzer machine, and in addition to that, I look at some of the systems that they have in place for manual processes that they're currently doing, and I look at ways to automate them and provide a little more consistency that way, and take away time that would be spent doing these very tedious tasks, and instead free up operators for more complicated human necessary tasks. You fella.
Do you feel that what your projects learn would somehow benefit or integrate into what we have already learned out from the International Space Station? And I mean, you didn't have the effects of zero gravity, so I'm not quite sure how everything you learned, except people living close together, what you really gained out of this that we don't currently already know? I'm not trying to be,
No, that's okay. That's a very fair question. So the question was, I didn't experience microgravity. I didn't experience zero gravity. I didn't experience long-term radiation exposure. And I didn't experience living entirely on life support. So how is it that the data that we've gained from this mission is helping people in the future of human space travel? Basically, we know about a lot of that stuff from the space station. We know how we can combat, if not cure, the effects of being in microgravity, although it's still a huge problem. We know a lot about radiation shielding. Can't have our astronauts up there if we didn't know about it, because they would fry. So our mission really was a social science mission, and really people don't know about it because people don't choose to live in isolated environments. With the internet nowadays, nobody is disconnected from anybody. You literally have thousands of people at the touch of a button, and the fact is that we don't actually know how people survive in small communities, especially as small as 6 people. So we don't add any technological insight into things. What we're adding and what subsequent missions are adding is data into how do you pick people. So how do I, if I had resumes from everyone in this room, how do I look and I say, okay, well, we're going to need this person, and then everyone does a personality test, and what are those actually telling us about people that we need to know? So does it matter that if you were sitting between 2 people on an airplane, you would choose to put your elbows on both armrests or not? What does that tell us about you, and is that important? So mostly we are test subjects, and the data that they get from us isn't going to help people be better shielded from radiation. It's not going to help people recycle water better. What it is going to help is it's going to make it so that people know that if you put these 6 type of people together, you are 90% more likely to get mission completion from every single member. And one of the things that the researchers learned from us was that our focus on mission completion was absolute. So despite any social problems that we had, if they had been looking at purely the data of how much we completed each of our tasks every day, and we had lots of tasks. We had, 50 surveys to do a week. We had sometimes 7 in a single day. We had different activities to do every day. But they said if they just looked at the data, they wouldn't have known that anything was wrong socially. And that's kind of a big deal. So no, we don't add to the general knowledge of how to get people into space and keep them healthy, but we add to the general knowledge of what kind of people you really want to send to space if you want something to get done. But excellent question. Let's hear from you there. Yes, certainly. So it starts with an application. Everyone gives in a resume and then also a project description of what it is that you would like to have as your personal research project in the dome. And this is to avoid, 6 people all wanting to do gardening. You got to have a little variety in your life. After that, you are submitted through a very rigorous psychological test evaluation. And it really is the thing about if you're sitting between 2 people on an airplane, do you put your arms on the armrests or not? It was one of the questions. And I was like, I know I've done both, I don't know. But all sorts of things like that. And really for me, I have no degrees in that kind of an area, so I have no idea what they're really looking for. After that, we went through a very long wait period. And then after that, they did personal interviews with the principal investigator of the mission, and they were able to, talk to you one-on-one. And again, they asked you a lot of weird hypothetical questions, more to evaluate your personality and all of that. And then the final aspect was 8 of us were chosen to go on that week-long hiking trip, and it was with the National Outdoor Leadership School, who kind of specialize in looking at people on these trips and evaluating their personalities. And so a lot of the data and selection criteria that they got from that program as well. And that was about seeing how these people who were trained to look at people and decide on their personality types, how they saw us, and then additionally how we worked together as a crew and who kind of tended to naturally bond and who, kind of maybe didn't, or maybe wasn't as helpful, or things like that. So it was who was left out at the end. Maybe who was maybe trying too hard or didn't really seem to fit. And only a social situation can do that. Back there.
I was just wondering what degrees you did obtain before you got your master's. What degrees you did obtain?
At the University of Hawaii, I got my bachelor's degrees in astronomy and physics. And from the University of Hawaii, I got my master's degree in mechanical engineering. So kind of my initial focus was like, okay, learn physics and astronomy, and that way you know how the world or the universe works. Throw in some planetary astronomy so that you know what's going to be happening on these planets if you need to be able to plan for dust storms and stuff like that. And then my initial idea was to go and then try to build habitats. But I went to the University of Idaho, and someone at the Space Grant Office asked me if I like robots. And I said yes. And they offered me a fellowship playing around with these tensegrity robots, which was really cool. And so I accepted. But the University of Idaho has a bunch of really awesome space programs that nobody really seems to know about. I went into that meeting and they were like, well, if you want it, nobody's applied for it and you seem like a great candidate, so we'll give it to you. Just go through the paperwork. And I'm like, I haven't even applied to this school yet. But it was great. They sent me to the NASA Ames Research Center for 2 summers where I got incredible mentorship by an extremely awesome roboticist. And it really, it opened up worlds of new ideas for me. So it was incredible. And I think anyone, if they're thinking about going to U of I, you should seriously check out the Space Grant Consortium. They have lots of stuff.